um, to discuss using differentiated instruction and universal design for learning to support the needs of ESE students in charter schools. All right. Just to get an idea of how many of you are with us today, thank you so much for joining. Thank you. All righty. I just want to give you some background on students with disability and charter schools. In charter schools, students with disability make up 8.79% of the student population, and in the traditional schools, it's 12.85% of students with disabilities that are enrolled in our traditional schools. So you can see that the numbers are catching up pretty quickly. There's only a 4% difference between the numbers of students with disabilities in charter schools and students with disabilities in the traditional schools. Also, as we look at Charter World, we can see that the Florida Charter School enrollment has increased from 67,500 students in 2003-2004 school year to over 203,000 students in the 2012-2013 school year. So there's been some growth between the students with disabilities. So in Charter World, we have to figure out how we can accommodate students with disabilities and keep them in our schools, and we're going to use that through differentiated instruction and through universal design for learning. So the overview of today's learning outcome is that the participants will be able to explain the principles of differentiated instruction. Participants will be able to demonstrate how to use differentiated instruction to meet the needs of diverse learners, and participants will be able to describe the planning process for differentiated instruction. Multiple intelligence. We're all aware of what multiple intelligences are. According to Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, everyone has 8 intelligence of varying abilities. They're verbal linguistic, musical, or rhythmic, logical or mathematical, visual, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, naturalistic, intrapersonal, and interpersonal. Well, in terms of the kid-friendly, we have you're either word smart, math smart, music smart, body smart, nature smart, self-smart, people smart, or art smart. So we do know that there are several, there are these 8 intelligences. However, at times we tend to forget about them and not teach to the students' learning style or to our method of learning. So the first objective is, what are the principles of differentiated instruction? Well, Diane Ravitch defines differentiated instruction as teachers' efforts to maximize each student's growth by recognizing that students have different ways of responding to instruction. Again, that goes back to the multiple intelligence theories. In differentiated classrooms, teachers begin where students are, not the front of the curriculum guide. They accept and build upon the premise that learners differ in important ways. They also accept and act on the premise that teachers must be ready to engage students in instruction through different learning modalities by appealing to diverse interests and by using varied rates of instruction along with varied degrees of complexity. We have to go back to the multiple intelligence theory and take a look at what are our ways of learning. Think about when we were in the classroom. Which one of these intelligence quotas were our main ways of learning? Some of us like to draw, but did our teachers allow us to express our assignments through drawing or through our artistic ways? And we may feel stifled. So that's the same way that our students may feel. So we have to look at students from varying degrees of their abilities to learn. What about universal design for learning? This is a set of principles for curriculum development that gives all individuals equal opportunities to learn. Universal design for learning basically came out of universal design as it related to architecture. How did we build buildings so that everyone had access to enter a building, whether it be the elevators or the ramps, or even in some cases the curved hallways that allowed wheelchairs in order proper passage through the hallways. Universal Design for Learning provides a blueprint for creating instructional goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone, not a single one-size-fits-all solution, but rather flexible approaches that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs. And CAST does really good work on Universal Design for Learning. The difference between UDL and DI is differentiated instruction, is differentiated instruction places a lot of emphasis on formative assessments, which make the basis for any instructional decisions. UDL looks at adjusting of instruction in a different way, and we'll talk about that in a little while. The principles of UDL is there's multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. Principles of differentiation is the teachers differentiate the content, they differentiate the process, and they differentiate the product. Okay? So differentiated instruction is teacher driven. When we put them together, the three principles of UDL, providing multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement, can actually be accomplished by authoring the process, the product, and content of the work, thereby incorporating three elements of differentiated instruction. The second objective is, how do we differentiate instruction to meet the needs of diverse learners? First, we differentiate the content. What the student needs to learn, because that's the content. The instructional concept should be broad-based, and all students should be given access to the same core content. The content's complexity should be adapted to students' learner profiles. Again, taking into account how everyone learns. And at the very beginning of the school year or of a lesson, teachers should take into account the way that the student learns by doing some learner profiles. Once you've gotten an opportunity to get to know your students, you have a pretty good idea as to how they are learning. Teachers can vary the presentation of content to best meet the needs of students. They can look at the textbooks, the lecture model, demonstration, or electronic books. Not every student is going to be a student who prefers to just sit in front of a textbook or hear a lecture. But rather, some students work best when they have actual demonstrations. Differentiating the content, you also look at how are you teaching the instruction, the lesson. Teacher or student-centered. How is it going to be? Is it going to be centered around what the teacher is doing, or is it going to be centered around what the students are doing? Is it going to be whole class instruction? I caution you on whole class instruction. Whole class instruction should be a very minute portion of your lesson. Small group instruction, and stations and cooperative groups. We can differentiate the content through each of these. Even in whole group instruction, you can differentiate the content, and even through small group instruction, you can select your groups so that your groups are geared towards maybe like groups of students. And of course, stations in the classroom, that is the easiest way to, or the quickest way to differentiate the content. And again, in cooperative groups, the way you create your groups is another way that you can differentiate the content. Differentiate the process. That's activities in which the student engaged to make sense or master the content. Examples include scaffolding, flexible grouping, interest centers, adjusting mastery time for slow learners, and encouraging advanced learners to pursue deeper topics. Here, when we're differentiating the content, this is not the watered down portion of it. This is, how do you make sure that every single student in your classroom is getting information? How do you make sure that they're grasping, they're holding the information, and they're able to regurgitate it or produce or demonstrate that they know the information? But first, we have to look at the process. What are we going to do as a teacher in order to ensure full mastery, or everyone is reaching their full potential in the classroom? Adjusting the mastery time for slow learners. Teachers tend to get hung up on their timelines. We cannot, as teachers, get hung up on the timeline as to what exactly needs to be taught at a specific time. If we're hung up on timelines, we will then leave students behind. And we can forget about the students who may not be working at the pace that the rest of the class, quote unquote, is working. How is it done? You can use different activities, such as you can go with your traditional paper group, cooperative groups, that's mentioned several times, cooperative grouping, stations, compacting, independent contracts, and choice opportunities. Choice opportunities, you can use a tic-tac-toe board and to provide choice opportunities. However, one of the easiest ways that we could do choice activities is through the Jeopardy game, where you have certain skills that are rated at a higher point level, but everyone gets to participate. Also, the same thing as it relates to independent contracts. Independent contracts are just that. They're between the teacher and the student. It could be between the teacher, the student, and the parent, but the independent contract is another way to monitor how a student is getting the information and how much they are getting when they get it. Stations is also another way. You have a variety of stations in your classroom, and they could be also used to gauge the lesson. Differentiate the products. This topic is near and dear because we tend to work with just the one size fits all. I'm going to give a test at the end of the day or at the end of the lesson, and it's going to be pencil and paper. But that's not the only way that students can demonstrate that they've grasped the information. How students apply and extend what they learned. Products should provide students with different ways to demonstrate their knowledge as well as various levels of difficulty, group or individual work, and various means of scoring. Should not be a one size fits all as it relates to exceptional students, students with special needs. Students who have learning disabilities may be stronger in one area. They may be stronger in writing, or they may be stronger in math. If the lesson or the output is based off of their strengths and they've demonstrated that they are capable of producing the work or regurgitating the knowledge, then they should not be penalized because they don't fit into a particular box of square peg in a round hole. So as we look at students who are able to, let's suppose you have a student in your classroom who is a verbal linguistic student but has difficulty writing down the information. It's okay to give the student an oral test. Yes, that may take a longer time for you to do. However, it's okay because they are demonstrating the knowledge. It's okay for you to read the assignment to them and have them demonstrate their knowledge of the lesson. It's okay to read the math problem to the student and have the student explain it to you. It's okay for smaller kids who have not mastered their timetables to still draw the tallies because they're getting the concept. That's okay. Again, we talked about how students demonstrate their knowledge. They could demonstrate it through traditional assessment, written reports, papers, through art or video projects. We're in a technological world. We're technologically advanced. A video project should not be deemed as something that's banned from the classroom or never tapped into. Oral report and presentations, PowerPoint presentation, skits, songs, dance. There's so many different ways that students can demonstrate their knowledge. It's okay for us to use them. Okay, we talked about using a tic-tac-toe board where the students will have a choice of activities that they will pick. So at the end of the lesson, if you are teaching a lesson on the history of Florida, students need to demonstrate that they have learned the lesson. They can do a video project on traditional places to visit in Florida, the history of Florida, St. Augustine, variety of different things they could do. They could do a brochure, and you tell them what the rubric are. These are the points that you need to hit in your presentation. These are the points you need to hit. If the student says, well, if you've learned that the student is not good at the project, maybe you have a pencil and paper quiz that they need to take to demonstrate that they have mastered the lesson that you have just taught. How do you plan for differentiation in your classroom? There's some proactive planning, and we'll spend some time here. We have to look at classroom management. We have to identify what the learning goals are. Decide what to teach. What is important in your course? Those, of course, are going to be the content, the standards, and the outcome. You need to pre-assess to determine existing knowledge. Students who have special needs have special plans, and those are called IEPs. It is very important that teachers are aware of what the IEPs state for each student in your classroom. Students have individual needs, and they have individual strengths. As a teacher, proactive planning is going to be crucial, especially when we have students in our classrooms who have specific needs. You're going to encounter students of varying learning needs. You're going to encounter students who are gifted. You're going to encounter your average students. You're going to encounter your students who have a learning disability in one area. That student may have a learning disability in math. If you're the English teacher, you should be fine with it. But if you're the math teacher and you're planning your lesson, you should be able to identify what specific area of math is this student struggling with, and how can I make sure that I touch it. There's spiraling of lessons. You will teach the lesson, content from last week or content from the very beginning of the book, to ensure that everyone is, and that's your universal design, that everyone. So you planning, you want to start with your baseline student and build. You want to scaffold on that. If you're teaching a lesson on proper writing, you're doing a writing program and you're writing a paragraph. Imagine that the student in your classroom does not even know how to write a sentence. You will begin with, when you're doing your learning goals, that although your learning goal will say students will write a paragraph today, you have to imagine that the students are not all at the same place. If you believe that all students are at the same place, you will find that you will miss our special education students. You'll miss them because you will plan for the top and not for the kids in between. So proactive planning is very important. You have to establish behavior norms, train the student, build in accountability for cooperative groups and individual assignments, assess and reflect, start small and keep logistics in mind, and we'll stay here for a minute. In establishing behavior norms, that's part of setting your classroom rules. However, there are going to be behavior norms for different activities in your classroom. If you're doing a group activity and you want students to share, then it is appropriate that the behavior norms for the group activity can include such things as, I must see active talking. However, if it's a teacher-guided instruction, then of course the behavior norms for that would not see active talking, because when the teacher is talking, more than likely you don't want to hear the students at that same time. You will give them opportunities to do so. However, during your instruction, you should have different behavior norms for different activities. If you are going to be doing partner work, the behavior norms may be that one student speaks for 1 minute and then the other student speaks for another minute. So even in designing your day-to-day lesson, you should adjust your behavior norms per the lesson. And of course, this is not going to come without training. You do have to train the students. You have to train the students to identify which behavior norms are appropriate. And this is going to take some while. It's going to take a little while because the students aren't going to come in on day one and know what all the behavior norms are for all of the activities. So you should rehearse the behavior norms. Okay, students, what are we doing today? How are we, if we're in cooperative groups, what should it look like? And it's okay. Training, you have to train the students, particularly if you're a teacher who are going to incorporate a variety of strategies in your classroom. And that's wonderful. You should use a variety of strategies in your classroom, but don't make it too cumbersome where the students are not understanding, okay, today we're doing group work, so we talk. Well, they need to be trained. Build in accountability for cooperative groups and individual assignments. One way to build in accountability is to identify who is doing what in each group. Identify who's the speaker, identify who's the leader, identify who's the note taker. And that way, everyone has some responsibility and you have accountability at the same time. Assess and reflect. When you assess and reflect, you're basically identifying where are some of the areas, the strong areas. Where are some of the areas that we're doing well? What are some of the areas that we need to work on? Reflect on it. And a very good way to assess and reflect is to do it with the group. So we did especially after the first activity, share with the students. Find out from them, what are they thinking? How did they feel like the lesson worked for them today? Is it okay? Do we need to turn the chairs a different way? Do I need to move one learning center? Do I need to extend the time in the learning center? And here's the key. Start small. There are a lot of different activities that we can do. Tons of activities. Don't be a hoarder of the activities. Start small. Introduce your kids to a few at a time, one or two. If you're using the tic-tac-toe board, you're using the tic-tac-toe board. Start small. Keep your logistics in mind. Keep the logistics in mind. We can ask the students to create videos, but if the students don't have video cameras, then either we have to produce it for them or we can't do that activity. So we have to keep all logistics in mind. How are we working it out? I want them to print their brochures and bring it to school. Explain to them, you may be able to go to the library. Most kids can do it at home. However, if we have a kid who is not able to go to the library or not able to do it at home, we may have to have a built-in time in class that we can work on the activity. Always keep your logistics in mind. Do not forget to plan how are you going to do all of this. And we know what the saying says. If we fail to plan, we plan to fail. Here's some steps to differentiate your classroom. Know your students. Know your students. One good way of getting to know your student is that you can do the multiple intelligence test for them, or do some personality testing, or just ask them. Classroom meetings are a good way to get to know your students and also build a sense of community. Build a sense of community so that everyone can appreciate the various perspectives. And it reduces bullying. It reduces name calling if we build a sense of community. And again, even if we're getting to know your students at the very beginning of the school of the year, get to know your students' name. Learn their names, especially if you're a new teacher. Nothing hurts a kid more than if a teacher doesn't know their name. And it's okay to step outside of your comfort zone, especially if you've been teaching for a long time and doing things the way that you've done them. The world has changed. We've moved up in technology, and so it's okay to step outside of your comfort zone. Don't say, "Oh, I don't know how to do all this stuff. I'm not sure." You may fail, you may have some debacles, but at the end of the day, it's okay to step out of your comfort zone. Build trust. Build trust with your students. If your students trust you, they will follow you and they will learn from you. Build trust amongst the classroom, amongst your students. Students trust each other, they will learn from each other. And assess your own learning. Not only are we assessing students' learning, but we are assessing our own learning. Identify the student's strength. After you've assessed your learning, you also are going to assess for the student's learning. Identify their strengths and identify the individual needs. And strengths are not just what the students are strong at doing, but what are they good at? What else you may have a student who's really shy in the classroom, but if you ask the student to speak up, they're a good speaker. They can present, and you play to their strength and bring them out of their shyness. Look at individual needs. Again, as we're dealing with students with special needs, they all have individual needs. Every student on an IEP does not need additional time to complete their assignment. Every student in an IEP does not need a behavior plan. So read the IEPs. Take a look at those IEPs, review them, and learn them. Because those will guide you to where you need to begin your instruction. Some more steps to differentiate in your classroom. Prior content knowledge varies. We cannot assume that because Johnny and Sally were in the same class last year, that they learned the same thing. Prior content knowledge varies from student to student, grade level to grade level, and coursework to coursework. Use familiar content when you're beginning to introduce new concepts. If you are introducing the concept of timetables, use the beads, use the counters. If you are introducing the concept of negative numbers, simply use banking concept. If you're teaching -10 plus 9, simple as saying, hey, if I owe you $10 and now I paid you $9, how much money do I owe you now? Oh, no, they're easy to count with money. However, use familiar content. If you're teaching absolute value, that is a concept that students may have difficulties with. But if you can teach them distance with absolute value, they will grasp it even faster. So know how to differentiate even the way that you want to use familiar content. Technology engages the students. Students love technology. We may think that they may abuse it, but if we use those tools for learning, think about the cell phone in the classroom. And every time I give the example of the cell phone in the classroom, I get lots of moans. Teachers say, oh, I don't want a cell phone in my classroom. But the simple thing is they have a lot of apps that you can use in your classroom. One, a calculator, that's one cheap tool if you're teaching math. Another way is there's a dictionary app. Folks, I need you to get the word of the day for today. And those are the words we're going to study and discuss in our classroom. There's also poll everywhere in which you can engage your students to these. Some of these may cost, some of them are free, some of them may take up some data, but there are ways around that. But technology engages. What's new to me, a new word to me, I've been reading about it and investigating it for a little while, is the idea of flipping the classroom. When we say flip the classroom, you can use something as simple as your cell phone. You can videotape yourself or audio tape yourself doing a lesson. You can either post it to YouTube or post it to your website. Send the parents a link and say, hey, this is the lesson that we went over today. I would like for you to spend 5 to 10 minutes reviewing this lesson with the student. And then once you finish reviewing the lesson, you may write down the password and you get your credit for homework. Simple as that. And you come back the next day to class, and then we review the content that was in the video or the link. Simple. Technology engages. There's so many different resources, the tools, programs for reading. You have Study Island is one, and iReady and Lexia and Achieve 3000. They give you some of the information that you need really, really handy. We have Jigsaw Learning. Saw this fairly early in colleges with Jigsaw Learning. That's where you would have students be responsible for different content in the classroom. Let's say again you're teaching the history of Florida, so you may assign group 1 places to visit in Florida, group 2 may do explorers, group 3 may do another topic, and group 4 may do something else, maybe different names that Florida has had. Well, they each research the project, and then they provide the lesson to the classroom. So everyone is responsible, but everyone will, for a different topic. However, everyone will be able to present their information at a different time or on the same day, and we all get the same information. Use the student interest. It's okay to poll your class and find out what their interests are and play to their interests. You have to relate the content to student interest. If you know you have a class with athletes or students who are interested in different clubs, relate the content to that. Because that's the way you're going to demonstrate connection. If students feel connected to your classroom, students are going to want to come back for more. They're going to be actively engaged. Have different roles for your students. We tend to think that this is for elementary school, but it's not. It's not only for elementary school. I know in elementary school we have the door holder, we have the one who takes the money to the lunchroom, we have the line leader, we have different roles for students in elementary, but it's the same thing for students in middle and high school. Give them that sense of community in your classroom. Give them that sense of belonging in your classroom. You will see that most times that will cut down on tardies. If everyone has a role in the classroom that they have to play, if you have 5 groups in your classroom and each group has a leader and a note taker, and they need to be there on time, maybe they'll lose their role if they miss it, then they'll want to come in. They'll feel a sense of connection. I have to get to class on time, because if I get to class on time, then I'll get to keep my role. I'll get to keep my role, or whether it be class president or whatever it is, but try to engage all of your students in the classroom. And that way we don't have the special ed kids over here, the regular kids over here, the gifted kids over here. We have everybody participating in the classroom. And remember, conversation leads to comprehension. Often we may find that we do not engage our kids in conversation. Teachers, sometimes we like to hear ourselves a lot in a classroom. We like to hear ourselves talk, but it's okay to hear the students talk too. Have some conversation. Let them share with you where they're going. Let them share with you what they're learning in your classroom. And it's okay, sometimes it's going to get off topic. There's nothing wrong with that. It can get off topic, but what we need to do is engage our students. Listen to our students. We've taught, remember, teacher-led instruction should be the shortest time in your classroom. The rest of your time is for student engagement. Okay? Look at the classroom environment. Make sure you have the right materials. Nothing is more embarrassing than being unprepared, not having the materials. Gauge the noise level. The noise level may be higher for some activities and lower for others. Student movement. Look at how students are going to move in the classroom. Do you need to put the tables in a circular way? Do you need them in a rectangular way? Do you need them in groups? How can students move through the classroom? Do students have their book bags on the floor? Do you have an area for the students to put their book bags on the floor? How are you monitoring? And again, adjust the physical space of the classroom. Teach to different learning styles and smarts. And that's the whole purpose of differentiated classroom and universal design for learning. Teach to different learning styles and smarts. Use challenging educational games. Jeopardy is another way that teachers are able to challenge their students by going through a variety of questions in a short amount of time, but you can use that for a review. However, your $100 question or your 10-point question or your 1-point question, your lower kids may opt to answer those questions. Or you can kind of have a bonus question in the middle that students are able to select from, and everybody feels a sense of accomplishment. Use a variety of examples and demonstration. If you need to go outside the classroom, if you're teaching a biology lesson or a science lesson and you need to go outside of the classroom, feel free. Kids love to be outside of the four walls. Again, you will definitely monitor for student movement and the noise level in walking through the classroom, but the logistics has to be planned up front. Yes, there may be a spontaneous moment where students are not grasping a specific concept of maybe a bug or maybe a tree that you're teaching about. So yes, if you may say, well, you know what, we're not getting it. Let's go outside and let's look for that particular leaf, or let's try to see if we can see that particular bug that we're talking about. And there's nothing wrong with just saying we're going to go outside and take a look today. Present materials in new, interesting, and different ways. Gone are the days of the dry-eyed commercial where the teacher is at the board saying 2 plus 2 is 4, or the square root of 36 is 6. We need to look at interesting and different ways in order to present our material. Because students know they're not engaged, then they know that they've either gotten away with it, or that you weren't prepared because you're just standing there giving them the information without engaging the students. Assessment of learning. Use a variety of products and express and maintain high. Differentiation of instruction does not mean that we water it down for some and step it up for others. We still want to maintain high expectations. The product should reflect activities, and another way that you could do is you can provide exit tickets for students. Be used as grades. The exit ticket is to check the pulse of the class, check the pulse of the today, and did they learn any questions? Do they have something that they want to want? The exit ticket should. What did they learn? What do they have questions about? And how comfortable do they feel with the exit tickets? Or never heard of exit tickets? Student checklists are another way. We can how well they learned the lesson. You can have a 3-bar code. It. 2 means I need some help, or 3 means I have no clue, or vice versa. It's okay that 1 is really good and 8 so we need to ensure that we are constantly checking for growth in our presentations, in our teaching, and our expectations of our students. Constantly checking, continual learning, learn from your students. We stated that before. Assess your learning, assess your students' learning too, and do your own research. You can get a lot of information from other people, from teachers, but do your research. Not just research and on the internet and Google things, but do your research with your classroom. Your exit tickets and your students' checklist, that's one way to research how your students are gaining their expertise in the lesson and in what they do. Okay? So in reviewing the learning outcomes, you can explain the principles of differentiated instruction, you can demonstrate how to use instruction to meet the needs of diverse learners, and you can describe the planning process for differentiated instruction. Now, I just wanted to give you a few reminders for differentiated instruction. Most teachers are already utilizing some form of differentiation. Most of us are. Take baby steps to implement. Take baby steps to implement, because if you're going to research, you will find a lot of ways that different people are differentiating their classroom. Different ways teachers are using UDL to bring their classroom to life and accommodate special education students. But you want to move it at your pace. You want to use what you can do in your classroom, what's manageable for you. There's nothing wrong with just implementing 2 or 3 things. Okay, I would say use more than one, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay if your next door teacher is using 5 and 6 different things. That's how they teach best, and they've probably grown their skill sets up to that many. Use assessments as expansions to teaching rather than to measure instruction. Now again, use assessments as expansion to teaching rather than to measure instruction. We have to measure how the instruction, but your assessment should be an expansion to what you have taught in the classroom. Emphasize critical and creative thinking as a goal in lesson design. Encourage your kids to think. Encourage them to bring their ideas into the classroom. It's okay for them to be creative in the classroom. Engaging all learners is essential. This is a positive, it's a key point here in this whole presentation, is that we have to engage all learners. We have to meet the needs of the diversity in our classroom. And that diversity, although it comes in other ways, it comes in our special education students. They bring a whole different meaning to inclusion when we have them in our classrooms. And in Charter World, we have to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all learners. As we can see from the onset of the presentation, the growth of special education students in Charter is big. Okay? In Florida, there's 12% of our students are special ed, and in Charter World, it's 8%. So that's not a huge gap. So we do have students in Charter World that have special needs. So we have to engage them in any way that we can, because their level of learning is also important too. It's important. Gone are the days of special ed kids sitting in the corner. Gone are the days when the special ed teacher is the only teacher that student is going to see. We do have a very small population that are self-contained and are maybe in center sites, but for the most part, our special ed kids are in our classrooms, and we have to meet their needs. We need to provide a balance between teacher-assigned and student-selected tasks. All the tasks in the classroom should not be just student selected, or get something off the tic-tac-toe board and do it today. We need to have a balance between the teacher assigned and student selected tasks, because we want to ensure that, again, that we're meeting everyone. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Well, for the purpose of your follow-up activity, you will need to identify a specific lesson in your classroom curriculum, and you will need to identify how you can differentiate that particular lesson. So this is a lesson that you have identified. You will turn it into the UCB Institute, and you will define the ways that you are going to differentiate the assignment. And I think I gave you some examples, but for instance, again, I go back to, if you were teaching a lesson on Florida and the history of Florida, what are some ways that you will differentiate that lesson in order to incorporate your students with special learning needs in your classroom? Are you going to use a variety of products? How are you going to get the information to them? Are they going to watch a video? Are you going to take a field trip? What is the product? What is going to be the outcome of the lesson? Are the students going to create brochures? Are they going to create models? Are they going to do art projects? And are you going to give them a choice of what they're going to do? And what is the lesson going to look like if I walk into your classroom? So it's almost like a lesson plan, but it's a differentiated lesson plan that you can have. Alrighty, that's all the time we have for today. We thank you so much for coming out, and